Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name is James. I'm 33 years old and age people say is mature enough to understand life. But for me, each passing day feels like a hammer striking the remnants of my long-worn pride. I'm a mechanic in a small town nestled between golden wheat fields and dusty red dirt roads. Roads that kick up clouds every time the wind sweeps through like it owns the place. This town, with its weathered wooden houses and sparsely populated streets, is my entire world. And yet, it's never truly been mine. Every morning, I wake up in a cramped room at the back of the house. The walls are thin, barely holding back the wind in winter, and the air always smells of engine oil and sweat like the scent has seeped into the wood itself, refusing to leave. The floor creaks when I move, and sometimes I wonder if the house is protesting my presence, just like everyone else in it. This house, if you can even call it that for the sake of dignity, is more a patchwork of wood and old nails than a home. A tin roof rattles and clatters when it rains, like it's reminding us that even the heavens want to break through. I live with my father, my mother, and my younger brother Dominic. But if someone asks me about family, I just give a faint smile. That word, family, it means nothing to me beyond scars that never quite healed. My father, Harrison, is a hard man. Harsh, really. His face is like stone tight, unmoving, cold. 20 years ago, he was a manager at a lumber mill. He used to come home with sawdust in his boots and pride in his eyes. But now he lingers around the house like a ghost with anger instead of chains. He lives off welfare checks and the few bucks I scrape together and bring home. And me? I'm just a shadow in his world. Barely even that. You're nothing but a lowly mechanic, he tells me, standing in the doorway of the kitchen, arms crossed, eyes like flint. A stain on my name. He says it like I chose this life. Like I wanted to be the one patching up other people's rusted engines and twisted axles in the heat, while he lounges in the chair that sags under his weight and bitterness. His voice drips with contempt. I don't even flinch anymore. That part of me is long dead. I've never understood it why he hates me so much. Once, when I was a kid, maybe 7 or 8, I worked up the courage to ask Mom, "Does Dad love me?" I said, voice small, unsure, but needing something. She was cutting vegetables, I remember. She froze for a second. Then she just patted my head, her hand trembling a little, and said softly, "Eat your food, James." Her eyes were glossy, like she was holding back something too heavy to say aloud. She never answered, and I learned to stop asking. Then there's Dominic. He's 7 years younger, and somehow my father's pride and joy. Went to college, got out of this place. Now he works in some glossy office 30 miles away, doing something with contracts and clients. He wears suits, drives a new car, has his hair always perfect, and a voice that commands attention. Whenever he visits, Dad sits up straighter. He shaves, puts on a clean shirt, and suddenly there's life in him. They sit at the table for hours, talking and laughing. "You see, they moved me to a new account," Dominic would say, gesturing with his fork like he's giving a boardroom presentation. "It's a big deal, lots of exposure." "That's my boy," Dad beams, nodding. "Making moves. Not like that other one." In those moments, I keep my head down, staring at my plate of cold rice. I don't taste it. I don't feel anything except the weight in my chest. Sometimes I slip out to the backyard, where the wind can drown out the sound of their laughter. Dominic never saw me as his brother. To him, I'm just a mechanic. A label he picked up from Dad. Every time he says it, the mechanic, like it's a curse or something dirty, I feel my heart constrict. My mother, Evelyn, is the only source of warmth in this house. She moves quietly, like a whisper through the rooms, her voice always soft, never raised. There's a gentleness in her touch, the kind that soothes without words, but it's wrapped in something else too, a sorrow that hides behind her eyes, like an old wound she's long since accepted will never heal. Sometimes, she watches me when I'm out front working on a car, wiping sweat from my brow or cursing under my breath when a bolt won't budge. She'll stand just by the screen door, arms crossed, her apron dusted with flour, and her eyes will settle on me not with judgment, but with a kind of helpless love. Like she wants to fix something but doesn't know how. Once, during dinner, I dropped a wrench. I'd forgotten it was in my pocket, and it clanged loudly on the floor when I shifted in my chair. Dad snapped his head toward me, face darkening. "Can't even eat without being a damn nuisance," he growled. I sat frozen, heat rising in my face. No one said anything. Dominic just smirked. But under the table, I felt her hand slide over mine. Warm, light. She gave my fingers a small squeeze, just enough to say, "I'm here." She didn't say a word. She never does in front of him. I don't blame her. I know she's suffering too, trapped in this same invisible cage of family expectations and quiet pain. Just like me. My job at the garage, it's not the kind of thing you write about in letters or bring up proudly at reunions. I fix cars, weld busted frames, patch tires. My hands are always black with grease, no matter how much I scrub them. Dirt's gotten into my nails, my skin, maybe even my bones. It's like the job's marked me, made me part of the scrap and rust I work with every day. The shop is a rundown shed at the far end of Main Street, with a tin roof that's rusted through in places. When it rains, the drops hammer down like coins on metal. A few old tools, half of them borrowed, some broken, line the walls. Sam, the boss, is a decent guy. Doesn't talk much. Sometimes brings me coffee when he knows I've been up late working. But he doesn't pay me enough to dream. And dreaming, well, it feels like a luxury I can't afford anyway. Every day I hunch over old trucks while the radio plays the same tired songs, voices fading in and out through the static. I've heard them 100 times. Maybe more. I try not to think about Dad's sneer or Dominic's smug voice echoing in my head. But on the quieter days, when it's just me and the sound of clanging metal, I catch myself thinking, what am I living for? Just to be called a lowly mechanic? This town is small. So small it feels like the world ends a few blocks from the church steps. Everybody knows everyone's business. And they all know me. Not as James. Not as a person. Just as Harrison's son, the mechanic. They don't say it loud, but I hear it all the same. Sometimes it's pity. Sometimes it's worse indifference. Once, I was standing outside the grocery store when Martha, a neighbor who always spoke like she was announcing something on a loudspeaker, looked right at me in front of half a dozen others and said, "James, why don't you study like Dominic? You gonna be a mechanic forever?" I forced a smile, shrugged, muttered, "Guess so," and walked away. But inside, I was burning. My ears rang with anger. I wanted to scream to tell them that I had dreams too. That I wanted more. That I wanted to be seen. But what was the point? No one would have cared. And so life dragged on, day after day, in an endless loop that felt more like a slow crawl to nowhere. I'd work, come home, take Dad's scolding, hear Dominic's smug remarks, then retreat to my small room at the back of the house, the only place where I could pretend the outside world didn't exist. Still, even in that silence, something gnawed at me, a hollow feeling, a question that never left. Where do I really belong? I didn't know the answer. But sometimes, when Mom would pass by and squeeze my hand or brush my shoulder, I felt like she was trying to tell me something, like there was a secret she couldn't say out loud. I saw it in her eyes. A quiet urgency, like she was waiting for something to break. And then, one day, everything began to change. As if fate decided it was done watching me suffocate slowly. That morning, the sky hung low. Heavy, wrapped in thick gray clouds that looked ready to crush the little town. I was at the garage, hunched over an old engine, my hands smeared with grease. The radio in the corner crackled, a familiar country song drifting out of the static. Normally, I let the music carry me through the hours, but today it only made me restless. My chest felt tight. My skin itched beneath the grime. Something was wrong, though I couldn't put a name to it. My hand slowed. The wrench in my grip suddenly felt heavier, as if it had soaked up the weight of some unseen burden. I stared at the bolts, but my mind was drifting somewhere else. Then the phone rang. It was the old landline we kept in the office, its ring shrill and jarring against the low hum of the shop. I wiped my hands on my grimy tank top, heart thudding in my chest. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, and yet something deep inside me already knew it wasn't going to be good. "Hello," I said, trying to sound steady. The voice on the other end trembled. "James, your mother, Evelyn, she's been admitted to the hospital." My breath caught. I gripped the phone tighter, fingers slick with sweat and oil. The voice continued, struggling. "Her condition, it's not good. You should come right away." The words hit like a punch to the gut. The wrench slipped from my hand, clattering onto the concrete floor. The sound echoed sharp, final, like some kind of warning bell. Mom. All I could see in my mind was her face, those kind eyes, that faint smile. The way she'd reach for my hand under the table, giving it that gentle squeeze like she was tethering me to the only warmth I had left. I didn't even think. I bolted from the garage, still in my oil-stained clothes. I grabbed my helmet, jumped on my beat-up motorcycle, and kicked it to life. The engine roared beneath me, loud and ragged, as if it, too, sensed the urgency. The road from the garage to the hospital wasn't far, maybe a few miles, but that day, it felt endless. The wind tore at my face, cold and sharp. It carried the scent of red dirt and dry grass, but none of it registered. I couldn't feel anything except the fear clawing at my chest. What was waiting for me at the hospital? What happened? Why didn't anyone tell me sooner? The questions spun through my head, swirling with panic and dread. All I could picture was Mom, lying still, alone. The only person who'd ever really loved me, who saw me even when I felt invisible. The hospital loomed ahead, small and aged, its white walls yellowing with time. The place smelled like antiseptic and something heavier, something clinical and final. I pushed through the doors, my boots leaving dark smudges on the clean floors as I rushed inside. A nurse spotted me, her expression shifting as she took in my dirty clothes and frantic eyes. "Room 212, she said gently, pointing down the corridor. Her voice was soft, but there was something in it, pity, maybe. A warning. I didn't ask anything else. I just ran. The hallway stretched out in front of me like a tunnel. Each step felt like it carried the weight of 1,000 regrets. At the end, I pushed open the door, and there she was, Mom, lying in that narrow hospital bed. Her face was pale, too pale, white as paper. Her eyes were closed, lashes trembling like she was caught in some painful dream. Strands of gray hair clung to her forehead, and 4 dripped into her arm, slow and steady, each drop echoing in the quiet like a countdown I couldn't stop. I stepped closer, my breath catching. "Mom," I whispered. She didn't stir. The machines beeped steadily, cold and clinical, keeping time in a room that felt suspended. "Where's the doctor?" I asked, voice cracking. A nurse came in to check the monitors. She gave me a soft look, the kind people use when there's nothing good to say. "He'll be here soon," she murmured. Then she slipped out, leaving me alone. I stood there, hands still stained with grease, feeling utterly useless. All I wanted to do was fix something for once, fix something that mattered. After what felt like hours, the doctor walked in. Middle-aged, thin-rimmed glasses, tired eyes. He didn't look at me right away, just flipped through a clipboard like he'd done it 1,000 times before. "Your mother has kidney failure," he said flatly. I stared at him. "What?" My voice was barely audible. "She's known about it for a while," he continued, still not meeting my eyes. "But she didn't want you to worry. She needs regular dialysis, but now the disease has progressed significantly. You should prepare yourself." Prepare myself. The words echoed in my head, cold, mechanical, cruel. I'd heard them before, in scenes from hospital dramas or tragic movies. But this time, I wasn't watching. I wasn't some detached viewer. I was the main character in one of those gut-wrenching stories, and I had no idea how to play the part. I turned to look at Mom. She lay motionless, her face ghost pale, the rhythm of her breath barely visible beneath the hospital blanket. A wave of pain surged through my chest so violently I thought it might crush me. Why didn't she tell me? Why did she fight this battle alone while I wasted away under a car hood, cursing my life, clueless? I lowered myself into the stiff chair beside her bed and reached for her hand. Her skin was cool, papery. I sat there the entire day, holding her hand, counting each faint breath like it was a thread keeping her tethered to this world. Dad didn't come. Not that I expected him to. He'd never shown Mom the kind of care he reserved for Dominic. And Dominic, my brother, the shining star of the family, he was probably pacing around his high-rise office, barking into a Bluetooth headset, going on about stocks or marketing strategies. I could almost see his polished shoes, his tailored suit, his watch that probably cost more than what I made in a year. He had no idea that Mom, the woman who gave him life, was lying here, teetering on the edge of death. It was just me in that stifling room. Me, the grease-stained nobody. Me and the woman who had always held my broken world together with quiet glances and secret hand squeezes. The sun began to set. A faint orange glow crept in through the narrow hospital window, casting soft light across her face. And then, she stirred. Her eyelids fluttered weakly, and for a moment I held my breath. "Mom," I whispered. Her eyes opened, clouded and glassy, but when they met mine, they lit up just a little, just enough. Her lips curled into a fragile smile. It was the smile of a mother who had spent her life loving quietly, loving fiercely. "James," she breathed. Her voice was so faint I had to lean in close enough to feel the shallow warmth of her breath on my cheek. "I have something to tell you," she whispered. My heart thudded. "Okay," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. "I'm listening. Something I've kept hidden for too long." She paused, each word a struggle, as though even the truth weighed too heavy to carry all at once. I gripped her hand tighter. "What is it, Mom?" Her eyes didn't leave mine. There was something in them, fear, pain, regret. Something deep and raw that I'd never seen before, not even during Dad's worst explosions. She was gathering everything she had left for this one moment. Then she said it. "James, you're not your father's son." I blinked. For a second, I didn't even understand the words. My brain refused to process them. "Well, what did you say?" My voice cracked. She didn't repeat it right away, just stared at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, pleading for understanding, for forgiveness, for something I didn't even know I could give. She reached up with trembling fingers and squeezed my hand. Harrison, he's not your real father. I hid it from you. From everyone. Because I didn't want you to grow up in pain. Her words were barely audible, but they struck me like thunder. I couldn't breathe. My ears rang. My mind reeled. She went on, but now, I can't take this secret with me any longer. I sat there stunned, feeling like the ground beneath me had given way, like the world had shifted sideways, and everything I'd known had turned to fog. Harrison, Dad, the man who treated me like garbage, who never missed a chance to cut me down. He wasn't my father. I felt something rise in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just a slow, boiling confusion that burned hotter with every heartbeat. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why. Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me suffer? But nothing came out. My throat closed. My chest tightened. My eyes stung. Tears threatened to spill. I looked at Mom, waiting, hoping she'd say more, something, anything to fill the growing void in my chest. My hands trembled as I held hers, the warmth of her skin barely there. She took another breath, shallow and fragile, but her eyes were resolute, as if she'd waited her whole life for this moment, these words. Before I met Harrison, I worked as a maid for a wealthy family in the city, she began, her voice halting. Every word she spoke cut into my heart like a jagged blade. They were the most powerful family in the area, she continued, living in a grand mansion, where I was just a poor girl working to survive. My mouth had gone dry. I couldn't speak, could barely breathe. There, I met the young master of the house. Your real father. It felt like ice poured through my veins. My real father? A young master? Me, James, the grease-stained mechanic, the family embarrassment, the son of a rich man? I shook my head slowly, instinctively, trying to hold the chaos in my mind at bay. But she didn't stop. Her voice trembled, but there was something deep in it. Something raw, like she was reliving it all, one memory at a time. His name was Wesley Carter, she said, and her eyes lit with something I couldn't place: nostalgia, sorrow, maybe even the ghost of happiness. He was young, handsome, kind, unlike any rich person I'd ever met. She let out a small breath that turned into a whisper of a laugh, broken, but real. We fell in love, James. A love I knew was impossible, but I couldn't resist. I listened, frozen. I was just a maid, she said, and he was the young master. We kept it secret, met in hidden corners of the garden, under the oak trees at night. But then, I became pregnant with you. She paused, her chest rising in tiny, painful heaves. Her eyes shimmered with tears, and I could see how deeply it still hurt her. I squeezed her hand tighter, though I was the one who needed strength. What happened then? I asked, barely able to form the words. She gave a faint, bitter smile. His family found out. The master and Mistress Wesley's parents, they wouldn't stand for it. A maid, pregnant with the young master's child? It was a scandal, a disgrace to them. She closed her eyes for a moment, her lips pressed tight. They kicked me out, James. They gave me some money and told me to leave the city, told me to never come back. My whole body was numb, yet my skin burned with disbelief. I had no choice, she said, her voice breaking. I was young, alone, and carrying you. I could feel her pain now, heavy and unrelenting, as if it were being poured straight into me. Wesley, he wanted to keep me, she whispered. He cried. He fought. But he wasn't strong enough to stand up to them. Not back then. She opened her eyes, locking them with mine. I left James. I left the only man I ever loved, carrying you, and a pain that never faded. I sat there, stunned. My whole identity felt like it was unraveling. Everything I thought I knew about myself, about Mom, about Dad, about family was crumbling like dust in my hands. I came to this town, she continued, her voice now just threads of sound. And I met Harrison. He agreed to marry me, even knowing I was pregnant. My fists clenched against the mattress. And he hated me for it, I said bitterly. She nodded, slowly. I thought he'd love you, she said, almost inaudibly. But I was wrong. So wrong. Her eyes filled with tears again. Harrison never accepted you as his own. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry for letting you grow up under his contempt, under the scorn of this whole town. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Tears streamed down my face, unstoppable. I didn't blame her. I couldn't. But the pain was overwhelming. Years spent belittled by Harrison, mocked by Dominic, pitted by the town. All of it built on a lie. No, not a lie, a secret. A secret Mom had carried like a weight chained to her soul. A secret that had imprisoned us both. She gasped for breath then, each inhale raspy, like every word she'd shared had stolen what little strength she had left. Her hand trembled as she lifted it, pointing slowly toward the small wooden table beside her bed. An old cloth bag sat there, the kind she always carried when we went to the grocery store, faded from time and use. In there's an envelope, she whispered, her voice as thin as paper. I turned toward the bag, already feeling the pressure in my chest tighten. I've kept it all these years, she continued. It has papers, proving you're Wesley Carter's son, and his address. I looked at her, eyes wide. She nodded faintly. I don't know where he is now, she said, barely audible. But you deserve to know the truth, James. You deserve to live as your true self. I stood, legs shaky beneath me. That old cloth bag looked so small, so harmless, but to me, it was a storm waiting to break. My fingers fumbled with the zipper, and inside, tucked away with gentle care, was a yellowed envelope. It was sealed, the flap crisp and slightly curled, like it had been handled often but never opened. My heart thudded as I slid it out and lifted the flap. Inside was a worn paternity document, official-looking, stamped and signed. Alongside it were a few folded pages in Mom's familiar handwriting, their creases soft and worn from time. The final item was a small slip of paper with an address written in ink still dark and neat despite the years. Carter Mansion, Oakwood Road, Eldridge City. The name Wesley Carter was underlined once, carefully. I stared at it, the letters blurring as emotion welled up in my throat. This man, my real father, was out there. Somewhere. I turned back to Mom. Her eyes were closed now, her breathing a little steadier but still shallow. Her face was calm, but the lines around her mouth told the truth. She was still in pain. I wanted to ask her everything. Why had she kept this from me? Did she ever try to contact him again? Did he ever look for us? Did he know about me at all? But I didn't ask. She was too weak. Every word she'd given me today had cost her something I could never repay. I couldn't push her further, so I just sat back down and held her hand, the envelope clutched tightly in the other. That night, I didn't leave the hospital. I stayed in that chair beside her, the paternity document and the address like a flame burning a hole in my mind. My thoughts spun endlessly. Who was Wesley Carter, really? Was he still alive? Was he married now, with more children? And if I showed up at his door, would he even believe me? Would he accept me? Or would I just be another reminder of something shameful, a mistake hidden behind the walls of a mansion? I stared out the small window. The town outside was asleep, wrapped in darkness, quiet and still. But inside me, something stirred. Not anger. Not yet. A yearning. A yearning to know where I came from. To understand who I really was. To escape the smallness of this life I'd been told was all I was worth. But with that yearning came fear. If I sought Wesley Carter out, if I knocked on that door, what would I find? Would I be welcomed, or would I be pushed away again? Just another stain, like I'd always been to Harrison. I looked down at the envelope in my hands, its weight suddenly unbearable. But I made a promise then, right there beside Mom's hospital bed. A vow I spoke aloud. No matter what happens, I won't let Mom bear this secret alone anymore. The next morning, Mom slipped into a coma. The doctor told me gently, like he was speaking to a child, that she didn't have much time left, that her body had simply run out of strength. I sat beside her again, the envelope still in my pocket, my hand still holding hers. I knew, deep down, that yesterday had been her last true moment of clarity, that whatever force had kept her awake long enough to tell me the truth had now spent itself. So I waited. For a miracle. For a flicker of her eyes, or a faint smile. Or at the very least, a chance to tell her I didn't blame her. That I loved her. No matter how painful the truth was. That afternoon, after hours by Mom's side in the cold hospital room, I left. The machine still beeped steadily, but her eyes hadn't fluttered once since dawn. I whispered goodbye, not forever, but for now, then rode into town with a single purpose weighing on my chest. I stopped by the general store and bought the cleanest shirt I could afford, a pale blue dress shirt from a discount rack. The sleeves were a little too short, and it smelled faintly of plastic wrap, but it was the best I had. I tucked the envelope into the breast pocket and buttoned it all the way up, as if that might somehow shield me from everything I was about to face. Then I got on my old motorcycle, its battered frame groaning beneath me, and left the town behind, heading toward Eldridge City, nearly 100 miles away. The engine roared louder than usual, maybe because it understood the weight of this journey. The road stretched endlessly ahead, straight and flat, disappearing into the horizon. The wind tore at me, cold and biting, but I didn't feel it. I couldn't. My heart was pounding too hard. My mind was too full of Mom's voice, her frail whisper, Wesley Carter. When the city appeared, it was like stepping into another world. Towering buildings loomed over wide, glistening streets. Sleek cars zipped past me, polished and perfect, their drivers hidden behind sunglasses and tinted glass. I felt like a ghost, a mechanic in second-hand clothes, riding a bike held together by prayers and rust, arriving in a place where people like me didn't belong. But I kept going. Oakwood Road was in the suburbs. There, behind rows of ancient oak trees, grand mansions stretched like something out of a storybook. I found it. The Carter estate. I knew the moment I saw it. White walls, red-tiled roof, an iron gate that curled like vines and flowers. It looked untouched by time. There was a brass plaque mounted to the stone. Carter. This was the place. Where Mom had worked. Where she had loved him. Where I was conceived, hidden away like a sin no one wanted to name. I got off the bike, my boots crunching against the gravel. My hands trembled as I approached the intercom. I stared at the small button for a long second, then pressed it. A burst of static crackled through the speaker, followed by a voice low, calm, and distant. Who's there? I swallowed hard. My voice didn't feel like my own. I'm James, Evelyn's son. I'm here to see Mr. Wesley Carter. I have something important to discuss. Silence. Long, suffocating silence. I almost turned around. I thought the voice had gone, or that they decided I wasn't worth the trouble. But then, the gate creaked open. The sound was slow and deliberate, like a curtain being drawn back on the next act of my life. I stepped inside. The garden was huge and flawless. Flower beds bloomed in tight symmetry, their colors so vivid they almost hurt to look at. A marble fountain bubbled quietly at the center, water dancing over carved stone. I caught sight of myself in its reflection: oil-stained jeans, scuffed boots, eyes wide and uncertain. I didn't belong here. Not in this world. An elderly man dressed in a spotless black suit with silver hair combed back like glass stood waiting just past the entry path. He said nothing, simply gave a small nod and gestured for me to follow. His shoes made no sound on the stone walkway, while mine thudded with each awkward step. We entered a living room larger than my entire house. The ceilings soared, with ornate wooden beams and skylights that flooded the room in golden light. Massive oil paintings adorned the walls, portraits of stern-looking men and elegant women. A fireplace crackled softly. The butler gestured for me to sit, but I remained standing, too tense to rest. He disappeared behind a tall wooden door. I was alone. I reached into my pocket and felt the envelope, my fingers pressing against the paper like it could anchor me. I wondered what kind of man Wesley Carter would be. Would he be like Harrison, cold, dismissive, distant? Or would he be the man Mom had loved, the one who whispered to her beneath oak trees? My stomach churned. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Then, the door opened. A man stepped in. My breath caught. He was tall. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed, not a strand out of place. He wore a gray tailored suit that looked effortless, like he'd been born in it. But it was his eyes that stopped me, green, sharp, and searching. And familiar. He looked at me like he wasn't sure what he was seeing. Like a ghost had walked through the front door. His brow furrowed slightly. "You're James?" he asked, his voice deep and cautious. "You're James." I nodded, my throat dry, my heart hammering inside my chest. I'm Evelyn's son. Evelyn, who used to work here. His expression shifted. The calm curiosity in his eyes turned to something sharper: shock, maybe even fear. "Evelyn?" he repeated, as if the name itself carried weight too heavy to bear. "You mean Evelyn who worked here 30 years ago?" I swallowed, struggling to find words that wouldn't collapse on my tongue. "She told me to give this to you." My hands trembled as I reached into my pocket and held out the envelope. She said, "I'm your son." The words came out like a shot in the quiet room, sudden, irreversible. I watched them hit him. Wesley Carter stared at me, his face pale. For a moment, I thought he might collapse. He took the envelope with hands that were no longer steady. As he opened it and unfolded the paternity document, I saw his eyes dart over the paper, then settle on Mom's handwriting. "Evelyn," he murmured, almost inaudibly. His voice broke, shattering in the stillness like glass. When he looked up at me, there were tears gathering in the corners of his eyes so much like mine. For the first time, the mighty Wesley Carter, a man who commanded a mansion and bore the weight of legacy, looked undone. "I looked for her," he said, his voice unsteady, cracking with every word. "After she was sent away. I tried. I really tried. But my family, my parents, they stopped me. I was just a kid. They hid everything from me. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't know about you. I wanted to lash out. I wanted to scream at him. Where were you? Why did you let her suffer alone? Why did I grow up with hate instead of love?" But I couldn't, because looking into his eyes, I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine pain. Not guilt alone, but grief, long buried and now clawing its way out. His hurt was different from mine, but it was real. "She's in the hospital," I said quietly, my voice trembling, fragile. "She has kidney failure, and she doesn't have much time." Wesley didn't pause. "Take me to her," he said. His voice was firm, resolute. "Now." We left immediately. He drove us in a sleek black sedan that glided over the road like it was built from silence. As we sped out of Eldridge City, he asked me about Mom. About my life. He didn't speak like a man making polite conversation. He asked like he needed to know. I told him. Slowly, piece by piece. I told him about the garage, about Harrison's scorn, Dominic's smugness, the town's sneers. I told him how Mom used to hold my hand after I came home bruised not from fights, but from the invisible wounds of being unwanted. I told him about the nights she worked late, too tired to eat, and the days she smiled anyway. Wesley listened in silence. I saw his jaw clench, his eyes glisten, but he didn't speak. When we reached the hospital, the sun had long since set. The night was quiet, solemn. Mom's room was just as I had left it, dim, cold, the monitor's beep slowing like a dying metronome. She lay still, her face pale, lips slightly parted as if whispering to someone only she could see. I took her hand gently, leaned in close. Mom, I found him. Wesley stepped forward beside me. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there looking at her, at the woman he'd lost and never stopped searching for. Then slowly, he knelt down beside her bed. His hand reached for hers, trembling. His voice choked with the weight of years. Evelyn, it's me. Wesley, I'm so sorry. Sorry for everything. Her eyelids fluttered. I held my breath. And then her eyes opened. Fogged by illness, yes, but still bright, still aware. She looked at me first, and then at him. And slowly, her lips curled into a faint smile. James. Wesley. She whispered, her voice thin and strained. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I leaned forward, holding her hand to my chest. Wesley took her other hand, his head bowed, shoulders shaking. In that moment, the three of us formed something real. Not the broken, bitter shape of the family I had grown up with, but something softer, deeper. A family born of truth, of wounds and healing. I cried. Wesley cried. And Mom smiled. Her eyes shone with a joy I had never seen before. That night, as stars filled the sky outside and the machines hummed around us, she passed. She died in my arms. In Wesley's arms. Her breathing stopped. Her body stilled. But her smile remained. Gentle. Peaceful. At last, she was free. And I knew she was at peace. The secret she'd carried for so long had finally been set free. And before she closed her eyes for the last time, she saw me find my father, saw me love the way I always should have been. Wesley hugged me tightly, his shoulders shaking with sobs. You're my son, James, he said, his voice resolute, trembling. And from now on, I won't let you be alone. I couldn't speak. I just nodded as tears kept falling. But for the first time, those tears didn't feel like grief alone. There was something else there, something warm, something new. A spark of hope, of a life that might finally belong to me. The next morning, I walked out of the hospital with red-rimmed eyes and a heart that felt like it had been carved hollow. Wesley drove me back to town in that sleek black car, the same one I'd ridden in just a day ago, though it felt like a lifetime had passed since then. He didn't say much on the drive, but when I glanced at him, I could see the shift in his eyes, determined, focused. I'll handle some business in the city, he said quietly, as we pulled up in front of the weathered old house. But I'll be back, James. I promise. I'll be at Evelyn's funeral. I gave a faint nod. I didn't know what to say. My heart was torn between gratitude for his presence and the growing anxiety of what lay ahead, facing Harrison and Dominic, walking back into that house like nothing had changed when everything had. Wesley reached across and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. The gesture was simple, but it anchored me in a way nothing else had. You're stronger than you think, he said, his voice low but steady. And then he turned the car around and disappeared into a cloud of red dust, leaving me standing in front of the house I'd grown up in. I took a deep breath. This house had never really been a home. It was a structure of wood and resentment, of scolding words and long silences. A space where I'd learned to hide my feelings and shrink myself into corners. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first: old wood, Harrison's stale cigarette smoke, and a kind of heaviness that hadn't lifted in years. The air felt thick with everything unspoken. Harrison was sitting at the kitchen table, same as always, reading the morning paper like nothing had happened. No acknowledgement of the night before. No anticipation of what I might say. Harrison, I said, trying to steady my voice. He looked up slowly. His eyes, cold and blank, landed on me. His brows pulled together, like I'd interrupted something important. I didn't call him Dad. Not anymore. Not just because I knew the truth, but because I had finally accepted that he'd never earned it. Mom's gone, I said. My voice cracked slightly, but I kept going. Last night. At the hospital. He blinked. Once. And that was it. No gasp. No shift in his expression. Nothing. Is that so? He said flatly. Not even a pause in the rustle of his newspaper. What are you going to do? My fists curled at my sides. I could feel the fire rising in me. All the years of being unwanted, unloved. But I forced it down. I'll arrange the funeral, I said. At the local church. This Saturday. He shrugged, barely even looking at me now. Just turned a page like the conversation was over. Like Mom, Evelyn had been nothing more than a tenant in his life. I couldn't stand to be in that house another second. Not with him. Not with that smell. Not with that apathy. I walked out without another word, the door slamming behind me. I told myself this wasn't about him or Dominic. It wasn't even about me. This was for Mom. For the woman who'd raised me with what little she had, who bore the weight of a lie to protect me, who deserved to be laid to rest with dignity. The next few days blurred into each other, meetings with the pastor, signing papers at the funeral home, choosing flowers she would have liked, trying to track down the few people who might care enough to come. I didn't sleep much. I didn't cry much, either. There wasn't time. All I could focus on was preparing for the funeral. I contacted the church myself, sat down with the pastor, chose the casket, picked the hymns. Then I went home and wrote the eulogy. Every line I put to paper brought fresh tears, but I kept writing. I had to. It was my promise to Mom that I'd honor her the best I could, even if it was for the last time. Saturday came cloaked in a sky the color of ash. The clouds hung low, heavy, like the heavens themselves were mourning with me. The church looked just as it had when I was a boy, worn, with its creaky pews and weathered steeple. But that day it was packed. Neighbors, old friends of Mom's, even some curious townsfolk I barely recognized had shown up. Whether they came out of love or nosiness, it didn't matter. She deserved a full house. I stood near the casket, dressed in the only suit I owned, the one Mom had bought me for high school graduation. It hung a bit looser now, time and labor having stripped some weight from me, but it felt right to wear it for her, to show her I hadn't forgotten. She lay there, her face peaceful, lips curled into a faint smile. Seeing her like that, so still, so distant, nearly broke me. I wanted to talk to her, to hear her laugh again, just once. But I reminded myself she was finally at rest, finally free. Then Harrison and Dominic arrived late, of course, as if punctuality was too much to ask. Harrison looked like he'd just rolled out of bed, his shirt wrinkled and collar stained. Dominic, always the showman, wore an expensive tailored suit and sunglasses like he was walking into a gala instead of his own mother's funeral. They didn't approach the casket, didn't even glance at her. They just sat in the front row, as if their presence alone was some grand gesture. I could feel my fists clench at my sides, my jaw tighten, but I kept my focus on the folded paper in my pocket. Then the pastor began the service, offering kind words and soft prayers. I rose when it was time, stepping up to the podium with trembling legs. I unfolded the eulogy and cleared my throat. My voice shook, but I pushed forward. I want to talk about a woman most of you knew as Evelyn. I began. But to me, she was everything. She was strength, and she was sacrifice. She was a smile when I was at my lowest, and a hand in the dark when no one else reached out. My voice caught as I remembered all those moments, her quiet strength, the way she hid her pain, the warmth she never withheld from me. She carried a secret, one she bore alone for decades. Not out of shame, but out of love. She protected me even when it broke her to do so. And then, just as I was about to continue, a voice sliced through the silence like a blade. Enough, James. I froze. The whole room turned. Dominic stood, sneering, arms crossed over his chest. Who do you think you are? He barked, his voice echoing in the church. Standing up there like you're some kind of hero. You're nothing but a lowly mechanic, pretending to grieve for attention. Gasps rippled through the room. My heart pounded. I couldn't move. Then Harrison, still slouched in his seat, chimed in with a smirk. He's right. All he's ever done is track grease through the house. Evelyn shouldn't have had to suffer because of him. My blood boiled. The years of mockery, of contempt, of being treated like I was nothing, surged through me all at once. My hands trembled at my sides. I wanted to yell, to finally give them what they'd given me. But before I could say a word, a voice rang out from the back of the church, deep, firm, and commanding. That's enough. Everything stopped. Heads turned. Eyes widened. The room fell into stunned silence. Wesley Carter stood in the doorway, tall, dignified, dressed in a sharp black suit. He walked down the aisle with purpose, his gaze never leaving me. The murmurs began, whispers spreading like wildfire. That's Wesley Carter, the tycoon from Eldridge. What's he doing here? He reached me and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. The weight of it steadied me, anchored me. His presence filled the room. He turned to Harrison and Dominic, eyes locked, voice calm but sharp as steel. This is my son, he said. James is my son, and I won't allow anyone, not even you, to insult him. Especially not today, as we bid farewell to Evelyn, the woman I loved and James's mother. Wesley's voice echoed through the church, low but clear, each word deliberate. The room seemed to hold its breath. Dominic's jaw slackened. Harrison cold, sneering. Harrison didn't even lift his eyes. For the first time in my life, I saw him silenced, and it wasn't by fear or shame, it was by truth. I turned to Wesley, my chest tight, eyes stinging. He wasn't just stepping in. He wasn't just defending me. He was claiming me openly, publicly, in front of everyone who had ever whispered behind my back or laughed at my stained coveralls or called me that boy Evelyn had out of wedlock. In that moment, everything Dominic ever mocked me for, everything Harrison ever belittled me over, it all fell away like dust in the wind. Wesley looked at me, his gaze soft, his voice quiet, but full of strength. "You're doing well, James. Your mother would be proud." I couldn't speak. I only nodded, swallowing hard. My throat burned from holding back emotion, but I stood tall. I didn't have to explain myself anymore. I didn't have to carry this burden alone. The rest of the service passed in reverent silence. The same people who used to walk past me in town without a glance now watched with something close to respect, or was it regret? Either way, Dominic and Harrison didn't utter another word. They sat with heads bowed, their faces burning with shame. When the pallbearers carried Mom's casket out, Wesley walked beside me. His presence was steady, a quiet strength at my side. I kept my eyes on the casket, my heart breaking all over again. But there was a strange peace inside me too. A peace that came from knowing I was no longer invisible. That even as I said goodbye to her, I was gaining something I never thought I'd have. The funeral ended under a gray sky, the air thick with silence. People dispersed slowly, like they didn't quite know what to do with what they'd just witnessed. I could feel it in their eyes. The image of Wesley Carter standing tall beside me, calling me his son, would stay with them. It stayed with me too. As I stood by Mom's grave, staring at the earth that would soon cover the woman who had carried and shielded me, I felt something loosen inside me. Not relief that she was gone, never that, but relief that her burden had ended, that her truth had been heard, that she'd been honored as she deserved. I was no longer just the quiet mechanic in the garage. I was James, Wesley Carter's son. But more than that, I was my mother's son, Evelyn's son, and I would carry that title with pride. When the crowd thinned, Wesley took my hand, strong and steady. "You don't need to stay here anymore, James," he said. "Come to Eldridge with me. That's where you belong." I looked at him, then back at the church behind us. That old church where I had sat through years of funerals and sermons, where people had side-eyed me and treated Mom like she was a stain on their perfect town. For 33 years I had tried to find meaning here, to make it home. But the only part of this place I ever loved now lay beneath the earth. I nodded. I didn't need to think. I didn't need to hesitate. "Okay," I said quietly. We returned to the house one last time. I went to my small room, the one tucked in the back, always cold in the winter and sweltering in the summer, and packed a few things. Just clothes, a worn photo of Mom from her youth, and the yellowed envelope she had given me, the one that had changed everything. Harrison sat at the kitchen table, cigarette between his fingers, the ashtray full. He didn't look up, didn't say a word. I didn't expect him to. Dominic had already left, slinking away after the funeral like a coward running from the truth. I didn't say goodbye. There was nothing left to say. I closed the door behind me without looking back. Wesley was waiting in the car. I climbed in, and we pulled away from the house, from the neighborhood, from the town that had shaped and scarred me. In the rearview mirror, I watched it grow smaller and smaller, until it was nothing but a cluster of fading rooftops beneath a gray sky. Eldridge was nothing like home. It was big and quiet and full of light. Wesley's mansion sat on a hill, its stone walls surrounded by manicured lawns and wide porches. I'd only ever seen places like this in movies. We walked inside, and I took it all in: the high ceilings, the polished floors, the sunlight spilling in through wide windows. I could feel my heart racing, my palms clammy. But Wesley turned to me, his tone unwavering. "This is your home too now, James," he said. "And you don't have to feel out of place." Wesley and I spent long evenings by the fireplace, the crackle of flames filling the silences between stories. He opened up to me in ways I never imagined a man like him would. He told me about his youth, the rise of his company, and most of all, about Mom, how he searched for her, how every lead had slipped through his fingers, and how it broke him to learn too late that she had a son, his son. "I lost Evelyn," he said one evening, his voice low and filled with regret. "But I won't lose you, James. You're my family." That simple sentence hit me harder than anything. Not because it was grand or poetic, but because it was true. He meant it. Life in Eldridge was like stepping into a different world. No creaky floorboards, no cigarette smoke lingering in the air, no condescending glances, just space to breathe and grow. Wesley brought me into his company not as a favor, but as a father guiding his son. Carter Enterprises wasn't just a business, it was his legacy. A major construction conglomerate with its name stamped across skyscrapers and bridges throughout the region. He didn't push me to become a mirror of him. He taught me, slowly, patiently, how to read blueprints, how to manage schedules, how to see beyond bolts and engines and into structures and leadership. And somehow, in those months, I stopped just surviving. I started living. For the first time, I saw myself as someone with worth. But the past has a way of clawing back. It was about 6 months after Mom's funeral. I was in the living room, seated at a long oak table spread with blueprints, red pens marking up project lines that Wesley had assigned me. I was deep in concentration when the butler approached quietly. "Mr. James, there are visitors at the front gate." I stood, puzzled. "Who?" He hesitated. "They said their names are Harrison and Dominic." My chest tightened. I stepped outside, the breeze brisk as the iron gate slowly opened. And there they stood. Harrison stooped. Older somehow had an expression I'd never seen before. Not smug, not stern. Submissive. Dominic stood beside him, hands shoved deep in his coat pockets, jaw tight, eyes darting anywhere but at me. "James," Harrison began, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "We heard you were doing well. We just wanted to check on you." "Check on me?" The words were almost laughable. For a second, I didn't say anything. I just watched them, watched the discomfort squirm beneath their skin. Dominic finally looked at me, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're living with Mr. Carter, right? Must be quite the place." He chuckled nervously. "We're family, James. After all, we raised you, didn't we? If you've got something good going, it's only fair to share with family, right?" That did it. The fury bubbled up in me, but I kept my voice even, my gaze locked on them like steel. "Family," I repeated. "You never treated me like family." I stepped closer, not with anger, but with truth. "Harrison, you called me the lowly mechanic for 33 years. You never once stood by me. Not when I was bullied. Not when Mom cried herself to sleep. Not once." I turned to Dominic, his fake smile gone. "And you mocked me in front of the whole town. Even at Mom's funeral, when I was trying to honor her, you tried to humiliate me. You don't get to show up here now pretending we're some happy family." They started stammering, voices overlapping, words tumbling over each other in a clumsy mess. "No, James, you've got it wrong," Dominic started. "We're just here because Harrison tried." I raised my hand, cutting them off. "I know why you're here," I said. "The town's been buzzing about Wesley Carter's son. You heard about his money, about my life changing. That's what this is about." Harrison paled. Dominic looked like he wanted to say something else, but I wasn't finished. "Mom left a will," I said, my voice low and calm. "Half the house you're living in was supposed to be mine. She wrote it clearly. But I didn't claim it because I want nothing from you. Not your house. Not your approval. Nothing." Their mouths parted, but I didn't give them the chance. "I've been too lenient with what you did to me. And what you did to Mom. From now on." I paused, taking a breath. "We have no connection." Dominic opened his mouth again, face flushed with frustration, but before he could speak, Harrison reached out and tugged his arm, shaking his head. They turned and walked away, Harrison and Dominic's shoulders hunched, heads low. Not a word of protest, not a backward glance. Just two broken men disappearing down the long driveway of the estate. As the wrought iron gates of the mansion slowly closed behind them with a quiet finality, something shifted in me. A weight lifted from my shoulders. For so many years, I'd carried the need to prove myself to be seen, heard, respected. I wanted their approval, their recognition. But I didn't need it anymore. Not because of Wesley's money, not because I lived in a mansion or wore tailored clothes, but because I finally knew who I was. My worth came from Mom's quiet, unwavering love. From the strength I'd found in myself when the world had tried to bury me. My new life in Eldridge was more than just comfort and marble floors. It was healing. It was peace. Wesley wasn't just my biological father. He became so much more my mentor, my friend, my anchor. He took time with me, every single day. We'd have coffee on the veranda in the morning light or sit by the fire in the evenings. He told me about the early years of his business, how he'd failed, lost everything, built again. And always, his story circled back to her. "Your mother," he'd say with a soft smile, "she had this quiet courage. She'd stand her ground, no matter what. You have that, James. You really do." Those words meant more to me than he knew. Some nights, we'd sit for hours as he reminisced about how they met, how she used to hum while working in the Carter kitchen, how she once told him she dreamed of a life where her child would be safe, free, and loved. "She carried so much alone," Wesley said once, his eyes glistening. "But she never let the world see her pain." And now, I realized, it was my turn to carry something forward for both of them. Work at Carter Enterprises took off fast. I was brought into project planning, client meetings, even site inspections for skyscrapers I once only saw in photos. I shook hands with CEOs, architects, and city officials. It was daunting, exhilarating, but never overwhelming, because Wesley was always close. Not hovering, but present. Proud. Yet it was the small things that brought me the most joy. A quiet moment in the garden. Wesley sliding me one of Mom's old recipes, written in her delicate cursive. A framed photo of her he placed on my office desk. It reminded me, I wasn't just here to make a living. I was here to live, in the truest sense. I wasn't just existing anymore, I was fulfilling something deeper. A dream planted in the heart of a woman who once held my hand in secret. A legacy shaped by a man who found me and never let go. Looking back now, I can see my path clearly. I understand what I never did before. Life isn't about how others see you. It's about how you see yourself. I used to be James, the despised mechanic, the invisible boy who fixed cars and swallowed pain. But now I am James Carter, a man who knows where he came from and who he is. A man who stood at the edge of abandonment and chose not to fall, but to rise. Mom gave me the truth. Wesley gave me a chance. But I chose to stand up. I chose to step out of the shadows. And if there's anything I could say to someone who feels the way I once did, worthless, lost, crushed under someone else's judgment, it would be this. Don't let them define you. Your truth isn't in their words. It's in your heart, in the people who love you, and in the quiet strength you carry, even when you think you don't. I found that truth, and I hope you will too. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.